Morning, how are you?
Very good, how are you doing?
Good, 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 good. Bit of a wet morning.
I think there's a thread like that ties what I did then and what I was interested in when I was a kid and what I do now, in that it's kind of about it is about storytelling. It's about looking at some dirt in the ground and going, I think this happened here.
Yeah.
I was almost completely useless at everything apart from that bit of it. But I pretty much knew I didn't want to be an archaeologist, and I got a studio job, like helping out designers. I eventually became an account manager, and then I did a bit of planning. And about 3 or 4 years into that, I was just a bit lost, really. And then I randomly met someone who was a designer who was thinking about moving into advertising, and she said, "Look, I'm going to do this D&AD course, so why don't you do it with me?" Absolutely loved it, completely, utterly. And then I quit my job. And Ross, my partner, we were at school together, and he said, "Oh, well, I've been doing this advertising thing. I've been working agency called Mother," and I was like, "Oh my God, that's what I'm doing." I was like, "Well, we should do this. We should do this together." And Ross was waiting tables. I was working in a bar. I was working 7 days a week. We were working on our book during the daytime, and literally, we'd given up about 2 weeks before we got a call from Hal Henry, HHCL, saying that our book was there. And then on the Sunday, John calls me up and says, we want to offer you a job. We were like, "Well, what about a placement?" And he was like, no, I want you to come in and start. Can you start tomorrow? We were like, "Okay, we'll start tomorrow. Come in, sign contract." Eventually, Jan and Luke, who were ECs at WCRS at the time, we were one of their first hirings. We came over to WCRS, and over the last 7 years, we've been sort of just working really hard and getting a bit lucky here and there and moving upwards, really. We've got a couple of things I suppose we're most proud of, but the one that always springs to mind to me is the Royal Marines and the Royal Navy. It's unlike any other client really working on armed forces stuff, because you meet people who've literally been to hell and back. Yeah. I don't know if you've seen that the Royal Marines Commando School documentary on Channel 4. It's just finished. It's a really, really good doc about following these Marines, sort of young lads going through the toughest military training in the world, and on the penultimate, or might have been the last episode, I'm sort of sat there feeding my little daughter sort of late at night watching this show, and I just hear this guy, he starts saying this speech, and I recognise it, and I look up, and he's reading an ad that I wrote 7-8 years ago that's been printed out on sort of A3 colour from a colour copier and put on his locker next to his thing, and he's reading it out because he's about to go through the toughest test of his life, and I think that's kind of just struck me as like that's when you know you've done something good, that it retains like that resonance over time. That's pretty rare, really. We've always been quite obsessive about the work being right for the audience, you know, and good marketing people, good advertising people, good creatives know how to look at it and go, well, I'll take that from it, but I won't take that from it, because, you know, that's the kind of thing that would happen in a research. I always go, and I always try and go and watch them, because they're really funny. I think these days they don't let them drink as much as they used to. I remember doing these groups, these focus groups for a smoking cessation drug, and you got these guys who heavy smokers, addicted to smoking, put them in a room, and it was to show them creative work, right? Not only that, is that they were basically allowed to drink all the way through it. They had beers on tap. So you've got these guys who are addicted to smoking, were not allowed to leave the room and have a cigarette, and you were giving them drink. And honestly, the carnage that ensued when we got the work out, because they'd had about an hour's worth of knocking back free Budweiser and not smoking. Yeah. They were all tense and drunk. It was just absolutely hopeless. But I think that sort of practice is gone now, thankfully, although it was quite funny. It's incredible, and it always terrifies me. It reminds me of how difficult it was. The amount of emails we get every day from young teams. The main thing is just to keep going. I mean, I think it really is people that that don't give up, that get in, and it's a simple thing, but you need to do whatever you can do to keep going. If that means working double shifts every weekend and working at nights in the week, then that's what it takes. When you see creative teams and looking at your book and getting crits and stuff like that, you've got to decide whether the pair of you, or if you work on your own by yourself, you've got to decide whether you agree with them, because they're not all right. There's teams that really, really believe in themselves and really, really back each other up, and you can see it when they walk in the room. They're choreographed really well. They have a natural choreography to each other. That they share the work amongst themselves and present the work, you know, together, and that comes across as really confident, really strong, and makes your ideas seem better. I really like creatives that I suppose are a bit like myself and Ross, that we loved, as writers, we just absolutely loved having the problem to solve. I think we got quite far quite quickly because we had a lot of stamina. You know, we hardly ever threw our toys out the pram. Maybe we should have done more often, but it's a real, you know, and I think if you can get into advertising, you know, you're absolutely blessed to have such an unbelievable job, even if no matter what level you're working at, what agency. The blessing of having a job where you can just go, okay, what am I going to do about this? What about if this guy says that? What about a bird saying that? What about, you know, I think that's just like you're so lucky to have got that far. You should sort of make the most of it, really. You know, you look at people's books, their websites. The best ones are the ones that kind of all look the same. That are just so simple, like insanely simple. You go in, first page, 8 campaigns, 12 campaigns, click through, simple. You just got, I think, remembering that ECDs or CDs or creatives have got literally zero time to look at your work. I remember going to crits with creative directors, eating a sandwich, flicking your book through a book like that. And that's why everyone's book was just press ad after press ad after press ad, or a poster, because they just knew that it would be that fast. I remember Steve Reeves, who's director now, has shot hundreds and hundreds of hours, a brilliant director. He was telling me that when him and his partner Paul started, they wrote a fake letter to an ECD with a picture of 2 children, 2 little Polaroids of little teenagers, and they wrote it in sort of girly handwriting on sort of like pink paper or something, claiming to be the mother of his 2 illegitimate twins. And then they sprayed it, covered it in like, you know, sort of poison or something, like, like perfume, and sent it, and immediately got a call and they got hired. When we first started creative directing, we started creative directing The Sun and the News of the World. That account sort of became really, really big really quickly, so they put us in place to creative direct it. But really, after sort of 1 campaign, everyone just stayed out of our hair. And so we had this little mini agency within the agency, little unit that became really tight, really got to know each other, really everything flowed really seamlessly. And it meant we could solve problems really quickly. And when you got the editor of The Sun screaming at you, saying, if I can get a paper out in a day, why the fuck can't you get an ad out in a week? You have to be able to work like that. So I think that's kind of where it built from, really. It built from that belief that if you leave us alone, we'll get it right. Yeah. And then if you let us make a mistake, we'll learn from it and get it right the next time. Can creativity be learned? I think broadly, my answer is yes. Creatives hate the word brainstorm, and I've sort of like, I hate that word as well. It's got too many horrific things attached to it. Speak. Oh, it's just, I mean, people are just allergic to the idea of being sat in a room and told to be creative. Yeah. But what we often do, and what I love doing, is sitting with creatives, or with anyone really, and just discussing a problem. Because I think at the end of a sort of conversation about a problem, you're going to get to some form of solution. And I suppose that's what I mean by I think creativity can be learned, because I think speaking in that way and discussing ideas in that way can be taught, or at least discussing things in the way that isn't right can be beaten out of people. And I think that kind of group discussion, that sort of problem solving on a more than sort of one-to-one basis, has been given a really bad reputation. Really, I think it's actually a lot more effective than it's given credit for, because the word brainstorm has kind of ruined it, and horrific things like no idea is a bad idea and shit like that. I genuinely love pitching. It's like this microcosm of advertising. It's your process, your agency's process in its purest form. Like I said, creativity is an iterative process. Yeah. You know, if you've got a block of marble at one end of the process, and you've got Michelangelo's David, is Michelangelo, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah, David at the other end. You know, the first block number 2, you know, the second stage is not going to look as good as number 10, but people want it immediately, don't they? They want you to chip it all off in one go, and you've got to go, well, here's my rough version. Yeah. It's this kind of real catch-22 that creatives have. They have this ability to see something and go, in that sort of block of perfectly clean, you know, block of marble with one tiny sort of chip taken over, I feel like there's a David in there. Yeah. Whereas no one else can see it. But the problem is that the creative can't explain. It's very difficult for the creative to explain why. They just have to go, you just have to trust me.